Good. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the November 2nd, 2023 School Committee meeting. We are at HCAM Studios and we are being recorded. At this time, I'd like to call the meeting to order and invite everyone to rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Excellent. Okay. At this time, we welcome public comments. If there are any public comments. Okay, seeing none, we will move right on to recognitions. Does anyone have any recognitions tonight? Okay. That brings us to reports. Do we know if Jack is coming
We
tonight?
are not having Jack Ionelli tonight because soccer is playing away.
Oh, that's good news, I think, right? If they.
Well, I think it's a scrimmage.
Okay, excellent. That brings us to the superintendent's report. Dr. Kavanaugh.
All right, thank you. So this is the superintendent's report for Thursday evening, November 2nd, 2023. Just a quick update on both LPAC and CPAC. LPAC had its family get together, so you could see some folks there having a nice time. The LPAC event just happened recently, and you can see that we've got some kids out playing in the field at Marathon, parents kind of congregating. Mrs. DeBow is out there serving pizza, and so I think it was a nice, it was last Saturday when it was 85 degrees outside, so they had a very nice, almost too hot afternoon, if there is such a thing in October. And then the CPAC had their fall family fun day, so you can just see some kids out there working on some crafts, working with pumpkins, just having a really nice time working on the parachute, and I think by all accounts, everybody had a great day at the CPAC Fall Family Fun Day. The high school just recently did its annual Halloween celebration. I thought these two photos juxtaposed were kind of clever. In the top photo, and these were all taken by Christine Strickland, in the top photo, all of those young women are cereal mascots. So you see like the Silly Rabbit, Trix is for kids, and the Sun for the Raisin Bran. But then in the bottom, what you see is cereal killers. So
Nice.
you have Budney Nut Cheerios.
Nice.
Yes.
Did they coordinate? Do you know?
No, I don't know that either group knew that the other was doing this. So cereal mascots and cereal killers. And then we have the Seven Dwarfs. And now for some serious aspects of the superintendent's report tonight. So just some updates on the Elmwood replacement project. We have 3 events of note coming up. The first is a public forum that will be next week on November 7th. And then the following week, we have special town meeting, and so we will be voting on that project. And then on November 28th, should everything go well on November 13th, there's a referendum vote for the borrowing. Some other information about the Elmwood project, and really we are, just kind of trying to simplify the facts around things like cost and traffic and all of those pieces that I know people are curious about. So Elmwood's cost in totality is $158 million, but there is an effective MSBA reimbursement of 38%, and that means that 38% is what they are willing to reimburse. There are some things that they just don't reimburse. And that effective reimbursement rate includes an unanticipated increase of $14.7 million. When we were in a meeting with them last week, we learned that we would be getting an additional $15 million, almost $15 million. I think we were all stunned in that meeting, but it is really great news for the community. So to make it as simple as possible, in the green text on the screen, the MSBA is contributing $61.5 million, and the town's contribution is expected to be $91.2 million. All right, and the cost to build new, as we just saw in the previous slide, is $91.2 million, or the cost to put modular classrooms on the Elmwood site is $81 million, with up to $83 million needed in repairs and renovations to that existing building. So you can sort of see the difference in price tag, new versus renovation and modulars. If Elmwood is only renovated, even with those modular classrooms, we won't be moving the fourth grade there, so that means that there is no upstream physical space relief at either the middle school or the high school. And I know we've talked a lot about that. This is a slide that we put in all the time, and it shows you our as-built floor plans right now. So for example, if we looked at Elmwood as built, the enrollment should accommodate up to about 650 students. Even though it says the current enrollment is 626, that's not accurate because this district-wide study was done several months ago. The projected enrollment at Elmwood is 774 students. So regardless of what happens, we are going to need additional space for about 148 students. And then you can kind of look down the line and you can see that there would be space needed for 221 students eventually at the middle school and 265 at the high school. That 234 school alleviates that, and that's what we mean when we say upstream. Because if you pull grade 4 out of Hopkins and you move grade 6 in, that frees up a very big area of the middle school to allow more middle school students or in the immediate high school students to move into that space. All right, just a little bit more math, and this was done for us by our OPM. Adjusted for inflation, Elmwood's construction cost is technically 8% less than Marathon. So I think people sometimes think that Marathon was so much less expensive, but we have to remember that that was built for about 400 kids. And when we build Elmwood, it will be being built for 1,200 kids. All right, the new Elmwood School campus has the queuing system to accommodate 140 cars and 18 buses, and that should reduce backups on Hayden Row Street. You can sort of see the diagram there of the Elmwood School, and what happens is people come in off Hayden Row. There is that sort of traffic circle there. You can go up to Marathon. You can go to Elmwood. And when you see the length of this driveway right here, that was very carefully planned so that it would accommodate a great number of cars or a great number of buses all the way around that building. And that's all I have for you. Some Elmwood facts and some Halloween fun.
Can I ask a question that I've seen a lot, and it's specifically around staffing? And it's my understanding that because we have more students, we would need more staffing anyway, and it's not just because of the building. These are staff that we would have had to hire regardless of whether we had a new building or not.
That is very true.
Yeah.
The staffing is not dependent on the physical plant, it's
Yeah.
dependent upon enrollment.
Yes, and so that's kind of a miscommunication I've seen in a lot of places, that because we're building this, we're fully staffing it from the ground up, and that's just not accurate. Yeah,
That's right, it's not accurate.
thank you.
Your 8% cost differential slide, is that absolute cost or is that like per student? Like does the,
I think that they base that on cost per square
per square
foot.
foot?
Yeah,
Okay.
Adjusted for inflation.
adjusted
Yeah.
for inflation, yes. And I think what it really speaks to is that the elementary school building committee made a lot of really smart design and materials choices to bring that cost way down. I mean, I think people will remember, so when we say that, oops, sorry, I'm going the wrong way. When we say that the Elmwood's cost is $158 million, people will remember the days when we were talking about it at $174 million. Yeah, and we went from 174 to 158, just making smart decisions.
And let me just say that the great news that we got from the MSBA was, I mean, I was blown away. An extra 15 million is huge. That's huge for us. And to get this full district solution with, we don't talk about this a lot, but the educational value of the 234 from what you've explained to us is really exciting, and it's a great way to go. But packaged in all that, the price tag is under 100 million. I think it's, we've gotten to a place I didn't expect we were going to get to. I'm really thrilled with the MSBA reconsidering how they reimburse.
Well, one of the as we keep talking about the cost of inflation that has happened over the past few years, and the MSBA has heard from school districts of the struggle to meet what they originally put out as their estimated budget. So the MSBA did go to the state, and the state did make an additional appropriation that they were then able to allocate among the projects, with us being one of the very first. So they heard from the districts and the state heard. So
That's phenomenal.
it was an appreciated additional appropriation.
I appreciate all the work and the advocating on behalf of the district that has gone into getting us to this point from that very large number. Not a small number now, but it's significantly better than where we started.
I also appreciate the cost that the team has been able to estimate on renovating Elmwood, and whether or not we would have to go right away to all of the modulars. I mean, we'd have to add capacity. It would end up being modulars, and just looking at those numbers for what you get for that investment, it's sort of eye-opening to see how much it would cost us just to kind of just barely find room for the kids.
And that doesn't cover for out at length, because the lifespan of a modular isn't very long. And eventually you have to build,
Yeah.
correct?
And when we started the Elmwood project, we should remember that that was an end-of-life project for the Elmwood School itself, which is why we talk about renovations and repairs to
Right.
that building.
Thank you. I apologize for my tardiness. I got stuck in a lot of traffic.
I have
Make it
one.
work.
Did I understand correctly, the cost of a modular is $1 million?
It can be 2 to 3 million.
2 to 3 million, not 1 million.
Yeah, so we did a project adding on to both Elmwood and Hopkins. It was a 4-classroom, 2-over-2 stack, and they were 2 to 3 million, that project.
And do those have facilities for the students in those, or do they have to come into the building?
They are attached to the building as they exist now. There is no facilities within.
Okay, so that,
Those are just strictly a 2-over-2 classroom.
right, so you're adding 4 classrooms and no additional facilities.
That's correct.
Does the state have any requirements on facilities available per student ratio?
As you're building, yes.
What is that?
That I don't know.
I'm sorry.
But I will say that Elmwood, as it exists, is not at the correct ratio.
Okay.
And I think you had said if the new school does not pass and we have to go with sort of a field of modulars, we'd have to have modular facilities
That's
as
correct.
well. Because
That's correct.
at that point, we can't.
It wouldn't just be a classroom build.
Right.
If you think of the Elmwood site, the challenge also is the constraints within the site and the gas line that runs in between. So you would not be able to add on the number of modulars connected to that building. Chances are they would be out in the field. So when you separate children out in the field, not only will you need restroom facilities, you'll need some type of potentially nursing facilities, office for some type of administration, somebody to be overseeing
Yeah.
that section of the school as well. So, but those costs are all part of what you see.
So it sounds like it's like if you were looking at a house, it's well past renovation.
Yes.
Like our own homes, we would be set it on fire or bulldoze it or whatever.
That. Definitely not that.
Happily not that, but bulldoze it and start over.
Yeah.
I would lose all the field space too. We'd lose
Yeah.
most of our field space. Like a little kind of Lollapalooza situation in the field. Yeah, cool.
Yeah, the site constraints are the reason why the proposed location is not on the
Yeah.
Elmwood site.
Yeah, and that location is kind of a mess anyway, right? With traffic and all of that stuff. Yeah.
And not prepared to take on the additional construction of
Oh, no.
putting those on the site while students are in school.
Yeah, I can't even imagine what that would look like. It would just be,
All right, thank you. So that brings us then into the school committee chair report. Payroll warrant S24008 has been approved. Warrant is included in the folder, and I also just wanted, we've talked about wanting to get visibility at different events throughout the schools. I believe everybody probably received an invitation to the 8th grade 5K next Thursday, the 9th, at the middle school at 1 o'clock. I am planning to go, would love company if anybody else is available at that time.
Thursday?
Thursday, November 9th, so that's next Thursday. Feels
1
funny that we're
p.m.?
into 1 p.m. Yep, and there are quite a few, I think the email said 200 kids participating in the 5K.
That's at the main field, right?
I have to look back and I will forward back to you. That's great. All right, are there liaison reports that people have? Okay, that's great. All right, so then next up we have the JV wrestling stipend.
Okay. I will invite our AD and Corey Mills up to talk about requests for boys volleyball and for JV wrestling. So thank you. I think you all remember Ricky Andrade, our new AD.
Hi.
And this is Corey Mills.
Welcome.
Thank you. So, I'd like to introduce Corey Mills, who is a incredible member of our coaching staff, as well as our Hopkinton educational community. Special ed teacher, wrestling coach, football coach. And so Corey is going to talk a little bit about what we're looking for as far as, that stipend for JV wrestling, that JV wrestling kind of already exists. As the numbers break down, we had 50 about the last 2 years. And so previous to that, we had about 35. And so this number has caused the need for this stipend. And Corey and Jesse Carner, who's a middle school coach, both brought this forward to me, and I definitely think it's worth bringing to the fold for this upcoming season and going forward. So.
Yeah, thank you all for hearing us out tonight. Yeah, my name is Corey Mills. This is going to be my first year as the varsity wrestling coach, but I've actually been with the team for 22 years, and I coached the middle school and JV team together for 16 years, and a lot of those years we were lucky to have 10, 15, 20 kids, and we kept getting added, and now, like Ricky said, we're at the space now where we're getting 50 kids in the room, and it looks like we're going to get that number again this year. It's something we're really excited about, and the great thing about wrestling is that if we can just get kids in the room, they all get to participate and practice to a very similar style that they would see in a match, in a competition. So they're getting a lot of experience out of that. So the more coaches that we can get in the room to give instruction, to provide some safe spaces for them to live compete during practices, it's only going to help our program grow.
Is this part of the unified group that you had here earlier?
No, yeah, Ricky left that off my resume also.
Okay, that's
I guess so much. There's so much.
Yeah, no. Though a unified wrestling team is something Chip and I have talked about, so that's next time I'll come back for that.
So two things. One
Yeah.
is I think unified wrestling would be awesome to add another unified sport. It sounds like this is a safety issue with the numbers.
Yeah, for sure. So we practice in the Doyle Gym in the middle school, which is a great home for us. But that's the size of a basketball court. So on that basketball court, we roll out a full-size wrestling mat and then 2 additional mats that we kind of tape onto that. And then on there, we will have about 50 kids, which otherwise pairs off to 25 groups. And you really do need multiple hands to get those to different sections, so we can have different areas where we can rotate the kids around and get them on and off the mat and make sure that everybody's accounted for. So with that kind of numbers, you definitely want at least 3 for safety reasons.
And doing the moves correctly.
Oh yeah.
Because if you don't do them correctly, then
Then what are
you're
we
in
doing it
trouble.
for? Yeah.
Can I just ask you about the 50 wrestlers?
Please.
Is that at the high school level, or is that the
Yeah.
whole program? And how
You're-
many JV, I mean, how many middle schoolers do we have?
So last year we had 24 middle school wrestlers. That was in addition to the 50. Yeah, so, and just to break down, a varsity wrestling team is 14 weight classes.
Yeah.
I like to look at a varsity wrestling team as about 20 kids, meaning you have 14 wrestlers and you might be rotating 6 to 7 kids throughout the season on that varsity lineup. So everybody else, we're actively trying to get matches throughout the season. We're working, we will get them some matches sometimes after a varsity match, but really the best way to ensure that they're getting matches every week is to be communicating with other teams that we know have a lot of big numbers, and then getting those teams to match up with us and going to their place and ripping out a couple JV matches that way.
So does the JV, you're in the middle school, so does the JV
Yeah.
team also practice in the same gym?
Yeah, we're all together.
And that be fit? That's not a big gym.
Is it 70 kids then, the 50 from the JV and another 20 varsity at the same time?
Oh, no, I'm sorry, it's 50 total.
Okay.
All together.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay. And we have a middle school coach,
yeah.
and we currently have a varsity and an assistant?
So yes, I'm the varsity coach. This year, Tommy Carner is going to be our assistant coach, and then Jesse Carner is our middle school coach.
Okay.
Yeah.
And would this position float or be dedicated to a portion that's JV at the high school level?
This position would be on the high school staff, and really I would have them largely in charge of the JV kids, making sure that one, they're getting the instruction they need, but also the matches that they they're entitled to throughout the season.
And I think you talked about adding roughly 6 events. So
Yeah.
assuming like 3 away, 3 home.
Yeah, kind of breaks down like that. We've actually had the events a lot in the past. There's 2 JV specific tournaments. There's 3 or 4 JV specific dual meets that we'll set up. Those are often on Sundays and Mondays. Last year I just went to all of them, which I'll probably, let's face it, during the winter it's hard to drag me off a mat. I'll probably attend most of those as well this year, but it'll be nice to have a JV specific coach that can give that instruction, that coaching during those.
And this would be funded out of the athletic revolving account?
And this is a non-cut sport, right?
Oh yeah.
So it is nice, especially in the winter, to offer a non-cut sport. I think we have indoor track as well. But there are a lot of there are a lot of students who want to try a sport, maybe haven't done, especially wrestling. You can't really start when you're 6. It's harder to find like a young program, so. Okay, so in Ms. Rothermick, the busing and everything that we would need for the events, in addition to the coach, which I know is covered by the revolving, we can cover the busing as well, and the officials, whatever we need.
Yep.
And just for folks at home, the athletic revolving account comes from the athletic user fees that are paid into it specific to athletics. The money has to be used for athletics. It can't be transferred to cover other things that we need in schools.
Yeah, that's correct.
All right.
I move that we approve the addition of a JV wrestling coach.
Okay, motion by Susan. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second by Holly. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Thank you very much for that. And then I believe there's a volleyball pilot in here as well.
So, hey, thank you.
Thanks, Ricky.
Yep.
Thank you so much
Thank
for
you.
coming out, I appreciate it.
Didn't have volleyball before this.
So, Spring Boys Volleyball. This is a team that has been brought to my attention right from day one that I started my position here. And I think a lot of people look at it as our girls volleyball team has been incredibly successful. It's a very popular sport. And so the natural progression is to start a boys volleyball team off of that. Boys volleyball has grown as a sport over the last 10 years. And there's a number of teams across the state, including in our league, the Tri-Valley League. So within the league now, 8 out of the 12 schools have a team. So there's already kind of a schedule built that makes scheduling a lot easier. They have varsity and JV teams, and specifically for volleyball, because in the spring we do not use the gyms for any high school sports aside from when the weather is poor in the start of the spring season in March and April. There is a lot of space to be able to have volleyball start. The interest, and I sent over kind of a form that I'd sent to the student population to see where the interest lies, and the interest in boys volleyball was extremely high. I've had a number of conversations with students, mostly sophomores, about potentially starting this program, and the excitement around that is very, very high. And I can tell, you know, again, I talked to a group of sophomores 2 days ago about it, and they are extremely excited. And so I think with the numbers that kind of replied to my survey and some other conversations I've had, I do think we're going to have about 30 students interested in joining that team this spring if it's approved. So for that reason, I'm looking to try and get a varsity coaching stipend as well as an assistant coaching stipend. I think with 30 kids, that's too much for one coach, and I think having that second coach would be very important. I have a coach in mind who has expressed interest already, and in my kind of proposal, I broke down some of the costs, and you know, with as far as busing is concerned, we're kind of under the assumption at this point that they're going to be responsible for getting themselves to any away matches, and I will be upfront with them very early on with that. And then all the other costs for this year, girls volleyball uses the same equipment that boys volleyball uses. We can use that. So the net's the same, the net system, the balls, everything for equipment is the same. And then for uniforms, many teams actually just use basketball uniforms as their volleyball uniforms. And so again, the upfront costs of the program are not as substantial as you might think. And I think based on the interest level and the excitement around the potential of the program, it's kind of a logical next step and an opportunity that I'd love to be able to give the students to participate in the spring.
Is there any liability with them driving themselves to the matches?
So we have an alternative transportation form that we have all of our student athletes fill out. I'm not sure how much you know about kind of our bus situation with athletics this year. It has not been great. On numerous occasions, I've actually had to cancel events because our buses were coming so late that they couldn't get to a place on time. So over the last couple of weeks, if we have a soccer game at 4 o'clock that isn't under lights, if I can't get a bus here at 4 o'clock, they're not gonna be able to play a game. So a lot of students and coaches have been pushing these forms, so it's mostly parents that are signing these forms off to say so-and-so student can go and ride with these 5 people, and then when the need arises for them to be able to ride with them, that's when the sheet comes into play, and they have their permission to ride with a parent with 3 or 4 other students in the car.
And these forms have had the look of an attorney that school is not held liable?
Yep.
I'm surprised you haven't had a volleyball team before that. I'm from Western Pennsylvania, and they've had a volleyball team down where we live 20, 30 years.
Wow.
Long time.
Yeah.
So in terms of looking at this, the numbers look like they line up, right? I was trying to pull the pilot, we had a policy on pilots, and
We do. So in the first year, there's a particular stipend that you get while something is being piloted. And then after that, you would be paid sort of commensurate with your experience and all of that.
And it comes back then after the pilot that we have to then vote it in as a permanent addition if the pilot is successful.
Yep.
Right. After 2 years?
I think it's just one.
I think it's just 1 year. So, I love this. I mean, I love athletics, and I'm not going to lie, personal bias. I love athletics. I have a couple of logistical concerns. I mean, certainly the budget. This will go into the budget for next. That we'll probably hear from you in a couple of weeks. The things that come to mind. I know the population is growing. I really appreciate you responding to student demand. I did look up and see the like Medfield and Norton and Norwood. Like I was looking at the competition schedule to see who we would play. Does this exist? I did see a couple of our TVL schools have ultimate frisbee. I was kind of looking to see which one was the more popular. So, you know, I know that you've done your due diligence. I know the students really want this. So the things that start to concern me beyond the cost of this in the budget is at some point our infrastructure, our capacity, like how many teams can a trainer support? How many, like it's that kind of stuff that I'm just a little bit leery of. So I don't know if you can speak to where we are in terms of like our training staff. I know we have to have administrators at all of our home games. We do pay a nominal stipend for that, but it's more the time and finding administrators who can be present. I know you have an assistant, but can you just speak a little bit to the athletic capacity? Because I don't want to say no. I think this is great, but I am a little bit watchful about the.
Sure, and it's definitely a concern that is warranted. So we have currently a full-time athletic trainer who is great at what she does. I know that she is spread thin, especially in the fall.
Yeah.
The fall, because we have football and a trainer or EMT is required at every single home football game, whether it's middle school, freshman, JV, or varsity. And so on those particular days, it's been tough because we've had to either find a substitute trainer to cover the other events going on, or we've had to get an EMT to kind of come in as that person that's, if something goes wrong in a game, they are there to take charge and make sure that everything goes okay. And that actually just happened today. We had an EMT for our freshman football game because our trainer was going to the varsity football game tonight. And so it's less of an issue in the spring in that there is only one sport where there needs to be a trainer on site when that sport is actually taking place. So that is varsity boys lacrosse. It is a contact sport, and so in the MIA rules, a trainer has to be at that game.
Okay.
For every other sport that we have in the spring, it is not mandatory to have a trainer there. It would be nice to have a trainer there, and part of my budget coming up next week is talking about the potential of hiring a 0.5 assistant athletic trainer. And if we're able to do that, that's going to help us immensely with trying to balance the student athlete to trainer ratio, and also to help us with getting coverage at every event that maybe currently does not always get coverage at.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of my hope and my plan, is to find someone who will be able to fill in that 0.5 spot. I also have someone who's interested in it that I know of, that I've had conversations with, so I'm very hopeful that she will, go forward with it if we have the position. But it is, and I'll be honest, it is still a concern. And I think it's a concern across the state, probably across the country, that trainers are being burnt out. The turnover is a lot. People do not want to work in these positions because they're not paid high enough. And the education that they need to get to become a trainer is such that they want to go be physical therapists and open their own practices and do stuff like that. So something has to change just across the board with that, and I don't know what it is. But this is kind of my plan and my thought about trying to bring someone else on to help with that. Yeah. I think in the spring with Amanda, we'll be able to support coverage by finding substitute trainers, which we've done this year, and by using EMTs. We can continue to do that.
Is it more expensive to use EMTs than a substitute trainer?
Yes.
In that, I imagine that cost over time is going to exceed the cost of an additional part-time trainer if you have to use EMTs too much.
Yes. So again, typically we're using EMTs for football, so it's not that we're using EMTs to cover a soccer game. It's a lot more often that it's just football. So it's really most of the time going to be used in the fall.
So the MIA does not require on-site for volleyball. Going back to this particular, so it sounds like the issue is the issue. This is not going to break us at the moment. We have the issue,
Correct.
Regardless. Which having raised 2 soccer players, I know they're not present on those fields either. That's a contact sport, so I feel your strain. But regarding the volleyball, because it's in the spring, because they're not required, that's helpful.
Yep.
Thank you.
It is. I think your point is a good point, just in terms of it's not just the cost of looking at what the coaches cost, but also the administrative pieces, the need for, we grew as not just as a district, but in terms of the number of athletic teams, so that we then needed to put in an assistant athletic director and.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And as far as the administrative team part, Jaquan, who has been our assistant athletic director this year, and I have done a great job of kind of splitting up responsibilities and being able to get to games.
Yeah.
And in the fall, we have about the same amount of teams as we do in the winter. In the spring, the winter's fewer, but in the spring. And so, I think we're going to continue to work well in a partnership to get to as many things as we can and make sure that we're present to see, all of our teams in action. And then aside from that, our administration, Principal Bishop, all the assistant principals are very good at coming out to events and kind of being there to support us. So.
It's hard to do to get to I appreciate your efforts. It's really hard to get around to all the sports.
Yeah.
I'm good.
Are there other questions? This is a point more in general than specific to this pilot, but I think the challenge in doing a one-year pilot is that we're then looking at approving the following year's budget
In a couple weeks.
in a couple weeks, where we have not had the opportunity to see how the pilot went. But
Yeah.
that's not directed at you. That's more just kind of thinking about the policy in general. Is there something?
How would that work? Like, if the pilot goes well, would you just vote on it mid-year? Or?
So if the pilot goes well, it would be folded into our athletics program.
Yeah.
But the problem is that to be folded into our athletics program, it has to become part of our budget.
Right?
And the budget's going to be if it's a spring sport. And this pilot, just for clarity, is for this spring, right?
Yes. Yeah.
So we're going to be voting the budget before this pilot has had an opportunity to run.
pilot has even started.
That's a problem for another day.
For 2 weeks.
We have 2 whole weeks to think about it.
Perhaps it's time to think about making pilot 2 years.
Yeah.
That would be a great conversation for our fabulous policy working group.
Subcommittee, I think.
I think you walked yourself into that.
I like how you just are like, whoop, like, it's not for us.
I'll be most excited to discuss that at 7:30 a.m.
With your cinnamon rolls? With cinnamon rolls.
Like an early.
With cinnamon rolls. Just for me. They're a little hard to put over the.
I can make a motion if
That would be fabulous.
I would like to move to approve the boys volleyball pilot program.
Okay, motion by Amanda, a second by Susan. All those in favor?
Aye.
Great, passes. Thank you so much for bringing this forward. I think our athletics program is a point of pride for the district, and very well aware that you are managing a lot of teams and a lot of meaningful to a lot of students that are able to participate. So thank you, and thank you for being responsive to student interests. So
Yeah. Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Thank you.
have a good night.
You too.
All right, this brings us into, I think, a big piece that people may be tuning in for, which is our beginning of our budget presentations. And I have Dr. Ghosh up first with the technology budget. Is that? Welcome.
Hello.
Nice to see you.
Good to see you. Is it possible to grab the screen? It's gonna cause me to do some technical work on the side.
I was going to say, I know somebody in the tech.
And just, I can just wing it. And move it over there. Okay. Well, good evening. I'm here to present the preliminary FY25 technology budget. So I think everyone should have a copy of the technology executive summary. The preliminary budget supports really three key areas in technology and instructional technology. The first priority of the technology budget is to maintain core operating systems and infrastructure. The current budget allows for increases to our network system account, our AV accounts, and contracted services, which helps pay for all security platforms, networking, and district repairs. In addition, the technology contracted services accounts also support all renewals for all major services provided throughout the district. The increase for FY20 is due to increased enrollment, inflationary costs, and social security improvements. The largest increase in FY25 will be in our district contracted services account, which supports district tools and enterprise level systems like PowerSchool. The second priority usually focuses around the technology teams and rebuilding our staff needs, particularly in data services and technical support. While over the last 5 years, the technology department has been reduced by about 3.4 FTEs or full-time positions. The tech department does recognize that the town's budget message of 4.4% over FY24. So nevertheless, the tech department requested both a full-time technician and a 0.4 data support position, which was not recommended for funding for FY25. The last priority for technology budget supports instructional technology and software needs, which help provide teachers and students access to digital resources, improve differentiated instruction, and heighten engagement. This preliminary budget supports instructional software as well. In FY25, there is a need for additional software licenses to support new students in classrooms that require digital curriculum. And then finally, the presented budget will continue to maintain the core equipment in classrooms, such as LCD projectors, document cameras, and student devices. The largest increase in this category will provide new leases for elementary teacher laptops and Chromebooks for the middle school. And just to kind of take a look at the budget overview and at least the expense summary, I put up a couple slides just to help explain the numbers for everybody in case there's questions. So really the third category is talking about expense summaries, but just in conclusion, there's no personnel increase for next year. But in terms of tech contracted services, which is our key main account and one of our key drivers for FY25 budget, is up roughly $91,498. And this increase in account is because of district software tools, because of adoptions of certain pilots, enrollment, and security additions. And then just the difference between the contracted services account and the technology infrastructure account. The technology infrastructure account really is a summary of two key accounts. One is our maintenance account, which supports all of the repairs across the district, all of the hardware that we fix, anything that breaks, these microphones break, we help fix it with that pocket of money district-wide. So that's one account, which is the maintenance account. The other are all these accounts called network system accounts. And technically, each school has a network system account, but we typically only use one of those, called the network system account. So those two, not to confuse you, but those two accounts basically make up the sum of the technology infrastructure account, which is currently at about 28.7% increase, or roughly $165,000 this year. And this increase primarily supports new virtual environment security, inflation, increased enrollment, customizations to various products like PowerSchool. And those are some of the big drivers in that particular account. Moving on just to some of the AV accounts. Each building has an AV account. The AV accounts typically support primarily TVs or classroom projectors, which are used for instructional purposes. And this year that account is up, it's a high percentage, 87%, but roughly $48,000. And that is because we need to begin the replacement of some of the projectors from the Marathon School. So we're trying to do that in batches, a few a year. So this is planning on replacing maybe 6 of those projectors. So over the course of a few years, we can replace the projectors at that school. The next account is instructional technology. This one is increased by about $157,000. The instructional technology accounts really support all of the hardware, mostly student devices, and also teacher devices across the district. This account is up primarily due to Hopkins and middle school, as they're due for a new Chromebook lease this year. And then all of the elementary teachers, which is Marathon, Elmwood, and Hopkins, are up for a new teacher lease or laptop this year. The next account is instructional software, which is up roughly 1.6%, or $3,900. And these accounts are up as a result of an adoption of a grant-funded curricular trial from this past year. Library accounts are up slightly of not up, but down by about 10%, or $2,200. That's because we've removed a tool that was no longer being used. And then the last account, which is our professional development account, which supports technical training and instructional training for staff, is been level funded, and there's no increase for that account. So that is essentially my overview, and I'm happy to answer questions or dig into any of the accounts that you have questions about.
Thank you. Questions?
I need to like absorb it.
Right.
Can I just ask you, which of, somewhere in here, is that where like the desktop support comes in? Like the people who support the student laptops, for example?
In terms of staff, or when you say desktop support?
Do we contract that out? I just,
We don't,
where
no,
that,
so-
who, what is,
so-
how is that provided?
In terms of support staff and technicians, those are salary-based positions, FTEs, that we have throughout the district. You know, we currently have 4 technicians, for example, supporting the buildings, and they're providing a lot of that desktop support. So some of it is repaired in-house.
Yeah.
Primarily, all of the Mac devices are repaired at the high school or in the shops here. And then the Chromebook devices, minor repairs are done here, but those are typically under warranty, and we ship those out to Acer, and they repair them and send them back. Hopefully that is the direction you want.
Yeah, I was just wondering, because, sorry, several of the line items obviously scale with enrollment. I was trying to connect where the enrollment, is it licensing, is it support, is it, how does the number of students grow the expense? Inflation, certainly, I'm thrilled with the investments in security features, because obviously that's top of mind for a lot of people, but I just wasn't clear exactly how to
Where the
correlate.
breakdown was? Yeah, so a part of that breakdown, a real like light analysis would be if you were to look at enrollment just for the one account, let's say contracted services.
Yeah.
You're looking at that being maybe, you know, a $10,000 or so increase to that account. You know, if you estimate a regular general ed student, you know, costing $100 per student just for that account, and maybe students that have higher, you know, needs, or special ed students maybe ranging anywhere from $350 to $400 a student increase per person just for contracted services. So that doesn't dig into any of the instructional accounts, which also would come up as well. So we have software at every building, for example, right? So when I did that analysis, that was just looking at contracted services. Another portion of that increase in contracted services would be inflation. Obviously, post-COVID, the cost of equipment and doing business, labor has gone up quite a bit. So that's a portion of it. And then the other big adjustment, you know, $50,000 or so into various PowerSchool products. Part of it was enrollment, but part of it is we've done customizations to certain tools to make them more efficient. We've added some new features and functionalities, for example, translation services for our enrollment package. Those start to add up when you consider PowerSchool being, you know, 6+ products now within that system. So that chunk of the 165 was right around 50,000 if you think of it.
Okay. That's helpful, thank you.
I had a couple things. One is I always appreciate the phased approach that technology takes to the leases, that we're not being hit by all of them at one time. That definitely, I like to highlight that for people at home. The other piece that is a little bit different than what we've seen in budgets in the past that I really liked is the piece where you talked a little bit about what was not recommended for funding and trying to meet our 4.4% budget message for the select board. I think it's nice to have those on our radar for kind of what the thinking is, what doesn't quite make the cut. Question, just on the slide that had the devices on it, that the high school devices that were listed, the student devices at the high school are not owned by the school, correct? They're still leased?
That's correct.
Yep,
So
okay.
I would say, anywhere from 75 to 80% of students participate in the lease-to-own
Yep.
program. Another portion of that is students bringing their own devices. And then, probably a percentage of that are students, loaning a device
Yep.
from the district. So when you look at some of these ratios, this is also primarily focusing on the teacher lease cycles. So when you see the staff lease column, that's just showing you kind of the rotation of the various staff laptops that we're purchasing. And so we have a 4-year cycle. It's a 3-year lease, right? And then after year 4, we replace those devices. So the elementary schools have now finished 4 years on their laptop and are up for a new one.
Great. I also would, just to piggyback off what you just said about the student devices, I appreciate that there are devices available to loan for students who are not able to purchase one on their own.
Yeah, I think that helps really provide, equal access to our curriculum and content is really, really required.
Great. Appreciate it. Thank you. Anybody else? I know it's a lot to take in the budget. I also want to invite appropriations, if you guys want to come up and sit at the table, or if you have questions. That's okay. But do you have any questions that you guys want to ask of Dr. Davis regarding the technology budget?
Well, my only question, I think, Amanda, you asked the question I was looking for. That was certainly a high number on the infrastructure and the usage requests, so I was looking for a breakdown also. I was kind of asking the same question. It's mostly been answered, but I guess I would have liked a little more numerical. How much of this was inflation? 5% or and growth? As a piece of it, sounded like most of it was due to increased usage or need for other functionality, features, and tools.
Correct. I would say a majority of that cost was either, adopting new products, modifying existing products, and then I think inflationary costs out of all those was probably the smallest, 4% or less. But the biggest was just a lot of these pilots or other products that we've had in the pipeline that we've been exploring have been adopted and now are showing up in the budget. And some of those are also due to some of the security efforts we're trying to take to ensure that our environment's more secure for our users and our community. Specifically, as one example is, we now have a much, broader Gmail product or professional level of workspace with Google products to give us more insight to a lot of the phishing attempts and monitoring that has to happen in that domain. And so that, is also a bigger chunk. When I look at that one product, that's like maybe 12 grand right there of that cost. On another 12 grand, for example, for another email manager so that we have insight to say, okay, if Dr. Kavanaugh calls me up and says, we need to know where these emails are coming and we need to block them, those tools allow us to do that, and those tools aren't cheap. And so those two products alone are maybe $24,000 out of that increase.
So just again, so I'm clear, because you broke the numbers out so nicely, but I'm too ignorant to understand them. The system tools like that, sort of district-wide tools, are those under contracted services?
Most of them are.
Okay.
Most of those tools are under contracted services, and some of the additional network-specific tools fall under the network system account, which falls under the infrastructure numbers. So the technology infrastructure account, which is the big one, that's got the network systems account and a maintenance. The maintenance account was level funded. That's at a standard $90,000 a year for maintenance. The most of the increase was in some of those network accounts and other accounts. So that's where some of those increases were. The examples I just gave, Gmail aspects, security aspects. We have a server environment as well, where we maintain, roughly 64 or so virtual machines. We've added additional security to those products this year. Maintenance on those servers are costs that we have to incur. Some of those costs, example, come when we purchase the server equipment and then those contracts run out. We've had to now renew some of those contracts. Those are now being folded into that account and resulting in some of these increases as well. And I can, if you're interested, I can definitely break down and provide you a list of the tools that have changed and been adjusted so you can see those and the dollar amounts associated with them.
I know that public systems, schools, municipal systems are a target often for those who want to do poor things, to invade and hack. So I know that it takes a lot of diligence and you have to stay on the security features and continually upgrade. And I appreciate your attention to that because it is a vulnerability both for the district just being functional, but also access to our students, which we have to, it's a safety concern. So do definitely appreciate that.
Can I ask there's probably a non-financial, but perhaps a financial cost of, it sounds like your department is not fully staffed. You said you lost 3.4, you didn't get 1.4. So how does that play out with your staff and yourself? Like, are we adding costs in other places because we have to outsource things? Is it just you guys all taking on more work? Is it, like, I want to understand the personal cost of it.
Yeah, just to give a history, right, as we ramped up, tech in the district, roughly 10 years or more since I've been in this position, we slowly added some tech integration staff to support teachers and to provide coaching for people to implement that technology. And part of those positions, that 3.4, most of those were those tech integration staff have been cut.
Yeah.
So across the whole district, we have 0.6 tech integration, and that 0.4 of that person is teaching as well, which is a challenge for that person to travel to the different buildings on their off time and be available and present to support those staff. So that is a challenge.
Yeah.
And I'm happy to share information with you about that challenge. And then the other challenge is probably data services. So we talk a lot about expansion and new buildings and new projects and new people and new teachers. Our staff is shrunk and stayed the same. And so, yes, that is a challenge for our staff. So they have taken on additional work, specifically in data services, where we're trying to assign and roster all these products to those staff in a timely manner, get state reporting done, and train all the new people we have. A lot of that falls on our department.
Yeah.
So it has been a challenge. Has it created more cost for us? A little bit in some of those tools I just talked about.
Yeah.
Those tools are helping us be more efficient and with some of the tasks we're asked to do. But at the same time, I think the biggest challenge we have is cross-training people right now and doing our day jobs at the same time, right? So if we have a full ticketing system where we're trying to deal with tickets, but it's hard if our data person has to go off and train a new principal on how to do attendance tracking, for example. That's where our big challenge is, I think, right now.
Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you very much. So, and just for folks at home who may be tuning in to this is just the very beginning of our budget process. We start with zero-based budget, making assumptions. We build the budget up, and then sometime in January, we come back to putting it all together. And I guess December it gets put together, and we kind of sometimes trim, sometimes tweak things from there. So, appreciate you coming, Dr. Ghosh.
Oh, thanks for having me.
Oh, Mr. Manning, would you like to?
I have no further questions, but Carolyn Wu is representing.
That's great.
Great.
Yeah.
So she has
They should.
Great.
Yeah, just one quick question. So I know you mentioned that library, that means the library system in each of the schools, or the technology costs or services?
For the library accounts?
Yeah, did you mean the libraries for each schools or?
So we have a library account for each school, which primarily deals with the circulation software, Opals. So that's one key product that my department manages and provides, right? Checking in, checking out resources. So we provide the renewal for that. That's the primary expense, which isn't a very high expense for each of the schools. And then on top of that, we have some library resources renewals that we provide for the districts. You know, whether it's a product like Pebble Go for the little ones at Marathon, or if it's JSTOR for the high school in order to conduct research and look up, you know, periodicals and articles, they have access to those tools. So there's a variety of those tools that we still have and we still support.
So is there any cost sharing with the town library or just a totally separate system?
We have some communication and connection with them. You know, for example, the town library, as long as students in the town participate, for example, and get a library card with the town, they can actually log into the library system, the town library system, with their hillers.org account and have access to some digital books online. So that kind of collaboration does exist, and we do try to meet with them to try to make things like that happen.
Thank you.
I'm a little slow on the uptake.
That's okay.
Okay. Each building does not have its own tech person, is that correct?
That's correct. We're close.
So
We have-
if Mrs. Smith's technology goes kaflooey, is there someone there who can get it back up and running for her?
Someone would be there pretty shortly. They can put in a ticket or call the tech office. And there are roughly, in the current situation, 2 technicians covering 3 buildings, the 3 elementary schools. So if that were to happen at Marathon and the tech was not in there in the moment, they could call us at the tech center office and we could tell one of the techs to go over there. So if it was an emergency, ideally, you know, within 5 to 10 minutes, a technician could be there to help. So there is some support, you know, obviously in a pretty fast turnaround, I guess, in most cases, but.
Is there educational support? You mentioned, you know, if a tech has to go and teach the assistant principal how to use a particular piece of software.
Do they have time for that? Is that the question?
Yeah.
In most cases, yes. Depends on the issue that's being taught and the circumstances, right, and the type of day, right? I mean,
Right.
there could be just circumstances where that might not be the priority in the moment, where they're trying to get a teacher, you know, connected to the Wi-Fi to do their instructional lesson, and someone else is doing a repair, and they might not be able to run over there and give that person immediate instruction. They might be able to direct them to some support documents to have them help themselves until we get there. But if they schedule that ahead of time, I think, yes, we can provide enough support for those people. And that was more of a role that the tech integration people took on at the buildings with some of that training, but those positions have shrunk.
But it would be ideal if they were back.
Yeah, into a certain capacity, yeah. I think, you know, do we need to go back to a full, you know, tech integration person per building? I don't think so, but I think if we had someone that had skills in multiple areas, you know, some data services skills, some, you know, some tech training skills, I think one additional person would definitely help us in that realm.
All right.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, so that brings us up to the student services budget. Welcome. Nice to see you.
Thank you.
We haven't seen her very recently, have we?
I feel like we saw you at was it the last meeting or the
I
meeting
think
before?
so. It's
Yeah.
becoming a habit. Exactly. So thank you for having me. I know you have the executive summary memo. We have a couple of slides to kind of illustrate some big ideas as we go along. So I thought I'd start us out by just giving you the big picture. So the student services budget comprises $15 million across multiple schools, a variety of job classes, and many, many categories. This year's request is for a 4.88% increase and includes multiple staffing requests in a variety of positions, as well as the hopeful funding of several innovation projects that would support the whole district. So that's kind of our big idea. In your memo, you have a summary, and I thought we could walk through it together, and then if you have questions, feel free to ask. In personnel this year, we have 3 broad categories that account for a request of $688,630. Those 3 categories are built out of one, the known contractual increases across job groups. So we have multiple job groups, and we have some known and unknown bargaining increases in the future. So additionally, we have the continued funding of several positions that we'll talk a little bit about tonight that have been added since the last budget. And then a third bucket would be the request for new positions based on need. So hopefully it's helpful to see that information. So as you have in your memo, what we can just take a look at is that increases due to contractual increases. We know that we have a 2.75% increase in our teachers' contract, so we have that number, we know what it is, and we will enter negotiations with our paraprofessionals union shortly. In terms of the funding of previously approved positions, I thought it would be wise to just remind the committee of what had been previously built into the budget since FY24. So I think we have a slide for that, which talks about 0.5 intensive special education teacher at Elmwood, which was added in August. We have 1 ABA paraprofessional also at Elmwood from August. 1 ABA paraprofessional at Hopkins, also from that August meeting. And then if you go in the Wayback Machine, in February of 2023, the school committee voted to add 3.0 ABA paraprofessionals to the marathon. So that is a significant increase, and so this budget request is asking to maintain all of those in the FY25 budget. Those positions were funded through a variety of mechanisms that include the preschool revolving fund, the IDEA or special education grant, we call that the 240 grant, and the early childhood version of that, which is the 262 federal grant. And it is foreseen that those same funding sources would support the costs in the future. Additionally, the request for this year includes new positions for FY25. And that's really, I think, what is the most important thing to maybe spend a little bit of time on tonight. So in looking at the needs and reviewing a variety of materials and data, talking to many people, reading the Athena report, talking to the 6 through 12 director and the K-5 director, I really feel strongly that these positions are both sound and logical investments. So they include a 1.0 severe intensive special education teacher at the high school, which I'd be happy to talk to you in more detail about. A 1.0 severe intensive special educator for the middle school. A 1.0 full-time moderate special education teacher, also at the middle school. And then 0.3 FTE of clerical support, and we can talk a little bit about that, but it has to do with the increased requirements of managing the IEPs. We have a new IEP coming through, as you know, and we've attempted to create a staffing ratio that is rational and aligned across all the buildings, and this would allow all of the buildings to have clerical support for special education purposes that is equitable and aligned with the work to be done. In terms of expenses, I think what's important to understand is that student services is more than just the staffing requests. We have a variety of lines, and many of them you're probably familiar with over the years. So I thought I'd hit some of the key ones. And then this slide, we're going to just talk a little bit about changes year over year. But broadly speaking, the 3 main lines that I think we want to highlight for tonight are transportation for special education. So as you know, every student who requires special education transportation has to have that transportation in a way that is appropriate, safe, reliable, and we worked very hard on that, and it is our estimate for next year that it will cost an additional $99,000 to provide that special education transportation. We have some of the known contractual increase rates for our transport vendors, and we also have a prognostication of exactly which routes and how many rides. In terms of tuitions, it's important to know that last year, the special education private schools were afforded a 14% tuition increase across the board as a remedy for their very real needs. And districts had to absorb that with very little notice, and I know you guys lived through that. You're now a year out from that, and so finally what we've seen is the circuit breaker reimbursement for that increased cost beginning to come back to the district. So if you recall, that's a reimbursement that happens in arrears, and you have to pay up front. And so you're in the good place now as a community. We are together here on this side of this issue, and we are happily going to receive approximately $600,000 more than previous year in circuit breaker, and that's directly due to the increased tuition from that 14% tuition increase.
Can I ask you a quick on
Yeah.
that one? Does that come to the district or does that go to the town? And when do we get that? That goes to the town, doesn't it?
It comes to the district and it comes through as quarterly payments.
Okay. Starting,
We just received our first quarter.
okay, great.
Yeah. So that's a big deal. So the FY25 budget reflects an increase in tuition of $509,000 and $99,000 in out-of-district transportation. However, that amount is almost exactly covered by the increase in circuit breaker reimbursement. Additionally, I wanted to highlight that the one cost that we know for sure is our summer programming, because our fiscal year starts July 1, so our ESY program has already occurred in this year, and we have those actual costs, and so we can accurately budget for next year knowing what it really did cost this year. And so we are requesting an additional $19,000 to meet the anticipated staffing needs as well as our known contractual increases based on real actual numbers. So before I talk about some of the innovation projects, the slide you have here is an example of some of the major mover lines from the budget year over year. And I thought it might be useful to see some examples that span the grade levels and span some of the locations and span some job types. And what's interesting to note here, so for example, preschool paraprofessionals, you can see that in FY24 that number is $317,000. It's preliminarily budgeted to be 210, but there's no cut to the number of paraprofessionals. Instead, what's happening is there's a different use of the revolving fund and our grant for that purpose. So some of the individual lines go up or down, but you really have to look underneath that and understand the funding sources and the specifics. So an example side by side is the marathon paras at 391, and they're going up, it looks like, quite a bit. And we know, because we just talked about it, that we're carrying those 3 paras from the previous ad, so they're now in. And that information is now baked into those numbers, as are the contractual increases for all of the paras there. So there's actually an add, but the math, you're seeing it for the first time in FY25. So we continued through. I thought you might want to see a special ed teacher example. So the Elmwood special ed teacher line has about a significant increase, I'd say, from 694 to 841. And what that reflects is the 0.5 intensive teacher addition now showing up in the FY25 budget, as well as the team chair positions, which were added, and those now are in the budget as well. And then I thought it might just be interesting if you kind of look down at some of the middle school and high school numbers. At the middle school, for example, the FY24 budget for special ed teachers is over $1 million, 1.1. And next year it's estimated to be 1.3. And when you look there, what you can see is that's the increase of the 2.0 requested special education teachers. Similarly, at the high school, the addition equates to the addition of a requested additional 1.0 teacher. And then I thought it might just be interesting to see the clerical increase, which is only a 0.3 FTE. However, because that 0.3 is going to increase the number, there's also some changes going on with how the different grants are being used. So the number looks higher, but the grant is actually providing more support somewhere else in the budget. And Susan is really good at that. And so it's working out great. So I thought you'd like to see some of those. I tried to avoid ones that identified a specific student, program, or staff person, but certainly if you had specific questions, I'd be happy to follow up with you at that level of detail privately.
Just to highlight, the preschool paras are not decreasing.
They are not.
Funding.
Correct. It's just moving. Yeah. And so this budget asks for no decrease to any of the paraprofessional FTE. It's going up by 5 FTE year over year.
And hopefully able to fill ones that are.
Yeah, we had some good news this week, I have to say. So we have a resume for a severe intensive teacher. So I wanted to let you know. We'll see how that proceeds. But I wanted to thank you, for that. So if we can shift to the final piece here, I think what's really interesting is that a number of things have come up by just being new, where I've been talking to people and they've raised things, or they've re-raised things that they've talked about in the past. So I've included in this year's budget request 3 things that I think are as innovative ideas. So one of the things, as you know, is we subscribe to a program called Safety Care, which is a de-escalation training program for staff. So many paraprofessionals, teachers, and some support staff, related service people are trained in how to formally de-escalate crisis situations. And historically, in Hopkinton, we do that training in the first couple of months of school, September, October, November. And so small groups of people are pulled out and they go do that, and other people cover, and then more people come in. It's a very elaborate system. But it does create some interruptions in the relationship building with some of our most relationship important people, and in the routine that you're building in September and October for some kids who really thrive on routine. And so it came through, loud and clear from everybody I talked to that it would be great if some chunk of that safety care work could happen in the summer. It would allow for people to start the school year trained, and it would also diminish that impact for some of the most vulnerable students. So you have a request to train 50 staff in the summer. We have 2 very seasoned in-house safety care trainers. And as you know, ESY runs in the summer, so we have many staff who are working in the summer. And the thought is that we would extend into Fridays and offer training, and people would be paid to attend, which is why we have a cost of about $12,500. But the goal would be to start the year with 50 staff trained and really cut at least in half, if not more, the impact of the fall training. So that's one big idea. And that would be a benefit to every school across the district. And so that's really a nice kind of equity move as well.
And so the 12.5 is compensation for coming into work in the summer on the day. Yeah. Okay.
And for the trainers.
Yeah.
I would imagine that if it had to be done in the fall, there would be an associated cost for substitutes to cover the positions that are.
If there were substitutes to be had, Nancy,
So-
perhaps. I mean, what we're doing at this point is very calculatedly, planfully covering, and all of that time could be spent thinking about instruction.
I love the focus on ensuring that kids have the right trusted people in front of them, the relationships.
Yeah.
I would imagine it's even harder to find special education trained substitutes, particularly
Yes, it
because
is.
we can't find any other substitute.
You're correct.
Right.
Yeah. Yep. Okay, and then another idea that's kind of come through as you've borne witness to the hiring concerns is the idea of building some type of career ladder or in-house training mechanism via graduate internship program to support staff who want to pursue a degree and want to pursue it here and want to stay here while they do it and maybe stay here when they're done. And so this is a pilot to potentially support 2 paraprofessionals with a small stipend that would defray their tuition and work towards aligning with a university that has a similar mission and has expertise in training of teachers in moderate or severe intensive special education. And the idea would be that we would host the pre-practicum and practicum as part of the year and supplement the tuition to, maybe not lose 2 people who need to go off and do that somewhere else. So it's a little pilot, and if successful, it's the kind of thing you could scale over time if we chose to.
Do you see anyone that might be interested in that at this point?
Yeah, well, the reality is we do occasionally get inquiries, and, it's very sad to not really be able to respond as robustly as we'd like to. Yeah. I have communicated with a number of colleges and universities. This is a market for them as well, and both for career changers and career ladder folks. And there are a number of local universities who I'm meeting with for whom they would love to partner with a school district like Hopkinton. Yeah. And then finally, I do think it's important, in the past there had been quite a bit of work to think thoughtfully about the possibility of tuitioning in students or a student from another district to our Excel 18 to 22 program. What I want to say about that is that I would be very, very thoughtful about that, and my interest in that would really be about building cohorts or expanding cohorts of kids if we benefited from that and our kids benefited from that. But I want to be honest and say that Hopkinton's transition program is wonderful and would be highly sought after. And certainly by tuitioning in a student or 2, you do gain some flexibility around even building the transition experience for all of our students out even more. So what I'm really proposing is beginning the process of reinvestigating that had happened a year or 2 ago, and I would just want to do that with your awareness and thinking, because there's work involved in doing that research.
We proved it.
So it never happened, though.
Okay.
My understanding is
Gotcha.
It didn't come to fruition, and so the times have changed. A couple years, big years have gone by, and so I think it would be worth researching again and revisiting, but I'm glad to hear that you were approving of it not too long ago. So finally, I included in my memo just a number of things around professional development and reorganizing a couple of lines to be clear. It is interesting, for example, that we don't currently have a preschool general education supply line, even though half of the preschoolers are general education tuition paying students. So there are some things there just to help create clarity, as well as to assist in proper budgeting. And then we're partnering with curriculum and instruction and hoping to unify all our translation expenses in one common pot of money, and to really be as efficient with that work as possible. That's a growth area for the district, and something we do together. And then finally, we have a strange little line of $4,000 that has been for something called a special ed van driver for transition. There isn't a person who does that currently, and we'd love to restructure some of those funds and use it for business development for the small business that we currently have running that needs, accounting support and other kinds of real business shipping and receiving support, because that's a transition skill and a job skill. So.
Question on that.
Yes.
Is the reason that we don't have a van driver, transition driver, because it's a difficult position to fill, or because the need is no longer?
So it's neither. It's
Okay.
So we own 2 vehicles.
Yes.
We have staff who have the license. However, that position hasn't been filled for many years, and I think it's a artifact that's carried through multiple years of the budget.
But the vans are able to be driven to get students
Correct.
where they
And when
need
we
to go. Yep.
can't do it because maybe our people are busy, we have special education transportation vendors as well. But I would foresee that if we were able to get the severe intensive high school teacher, I would work very hard to have them also get their license, because that would be another person. So I'm always thinking.
Well, my understanding too is that the high school severe intensive students do go out to do things to skills that would be helpful to them that would require a van.
Yes, and in fact, more and more students who are in our high school are wanting to do that earlier and wanting to phase into doing that, progressively and thoughtfully. And so a major driver behind that idea is really to provide someone to do that with them and thoughtfully. Great, so I'm open for questions.
Thank you. Questions from the committee? Start down.
I asked mine beforehand.
Okay. Holly, you.
The new positions, are these based on projections for next year's enrollment, or are they based on a need that we have that we cannot currently fill? Like the extra intensive teacher in the high school and the middle school, I know those are both things that have been discussed on and off. So
Sure.
Yeah.
So let's take them one by one.
Sure, yeah.
So if you look at the two middle school positions, they're informed primarily from two main drivers.
Yep.
Right. So certainly the Athena report was very clear that these two specific positions were really important to in how we would organize the middle school across the board. And frankly, these two positions allow for support for specific groups of students, but they also provide support for the 9 other learning specialists at the middle school for whom their caseload would be potentially each lightened. And it further gives us room to consider some restructuring and reorganizing of the learning specialists around the instruction of reading.
Yeah.
It further gives us more capacity to organize the paraprofessional schedules to be better aligned with the teachers they support.
Yeah.
So that one for the middle school really knocks over multiple dominoes.
That's excellent.
And is of course related to the numbers and needs of students.
Yeah.
The high school position really relates to the fact that, which is very good news, is that students not only are staying in Hopkinton, but they're staying a little longer and accessing transition skills more and more. So we can project out for the next 3 years. We can see basically by student who we anticipate, and we know that that number will get bigger and is already big enough that it's important to do it for next year.
Yeah.
It allows for us to support juniors and seniors at the high school, as well as 19-year-olds, 20-year-olds, and it bridges all the way into the transition program and supports the transition teacher with a colleague.
That's excellent.
And that's very, very important.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you.
So just for clarity on, to piggyback off of what you just said, the high school intensive position that's proposed would also assist with the transition program.
So what we're currently doing, if we're lucky enough to be funded, is proposing that we would really expand the spectrum of teachers both at the high school and who bridge into the transition program. And we think about our students individually. For some students, 4 years in the high school is perfect and makes a lot of sense. And for some students, bridging across and starting a part-time job or starting job shadowing or an internship makes sense when you're a junior or a senior. And so this would at least give us the opportunity to individualize for them. And it would provide a teacher who could operate in both worlds successfully.
Did you have another question before?
Oh, the 18 to 22, determining if that we can receive kiddos from out of district. Are there specific requirements that need to be met within like the state system, or is it just kind of all internally whether we're like, yes, we want to do this?
So there are certainly school district steps where you probably did this as a school committee. There was a presentation, you understood the parameters. There's also communication and outreach to other districts, but we are a approved public accredited school system and have some power to collaborate with our partner districts. And, this idea would really be to see if there's a potential to enhance our programming and also perhaps support a student who might be isolated in their community with peers, which would be great.
I love our 18 to 22.
I do too.
Yeah.
I'm grateful. Thank you. Yep.
Just to piggyback on that, I have questions, but just on that specific point, anticipating, and I know you're going to look into this and we'll hear back from you, but anticipating the demand will be fairly high. Are we typically, is it typically within our control to decide what profile of child would complement our existing students? Or is that, does it have to be open first come, first serve for equity
So
reasons? Or
there would be a process, and we would make sure that process is fair and equitable, but the district has the capacity to make those decisions.
we just publish it up front? Everyone, okay, thank you, sir.
No, I think that's great. I also love the 18 to 22 program. I love how it's evolved over the past several years, and love that you're looking to bring something that would be a benefit to our students and to the program as a whole. Question about what you had said a minute ago about students staying longer. I think you said in the high school, but maybe you said in our district.
Like transition, yeah.
Is that compared to the number of students, say, who would have gone perhaps out of district to get what their needs are met?
So I have a sense that the growth is really population growth for real, as well as the fact that the transition program is well regarded. So it's not stigmatizing to stay for another year because people see it as a very important, intervention and resource for their family. And so my sense from talking to the teacher and being in the program is that every year from going forward, we will gain 1 or 2 more students annually, and that those students will stay for the right amount of time for them and their family. So they don't all stay for 4 years, but they might stay 1, 2, or 3 years to do certain goals. They might attend a community college class, get a job, work through an internship to learn what kind of job they're most interested in, and then transition out.
Love the individualized approach.
It's the best part. It's so cool. Yeah.
All right, so if there are no more questions, you have a question?
I haven't asked any questions yet. I do have
sorry.
just a couple questions. I just have to say, I find that you have the most complex budget of any. I really feel like your budget in particular is challenging to get my head around. It's not just you. It's just it has been that way. So I do admit that it is difficult for me to take it in and figure out with some of like the housekeeping, with the accounts, and apples to apples, like has this changed from last year? And so I guess I would wonder, Ms. Rothenberg, is if the 4.88% increase, is that like apples to apples from last year, like the same bucket of things that we did last year? Or like, I know there were some suggestions in here that we, for example, add a gen ed preschool account, like, so that would go over, and then move something to curriculum and that would go over. So are we talking apples to apples, 4.88%, or?
We are. So, within contracted service, as an example, is where they paid for some of their translations.
Yeah.
So now in their contracted service, they're still contracted services, but they're not accounting for translations. So that you'll see later on with curriculum instruction, a full bucket just for translations. So it's more clear across the district.
Yeah, I appreciate the housekeeping. I think it's important to do.
Yeah.
If that had stayed here, would it be like a 4.92% increase? Like, you know what I mean? Like, will it bump up the curriculum budget? Like, overall, is this? I just can't quite get my head around. There's so much movement, and there's grant money, and like just trying to net it all out to what is actually increase.
I mean, for the most part, this is apples to apples. So, there are times in every budget year where we'll say, you know what, this makes more sense over here.
Yeah.
And we're not talking huge, like, market movers.
Right. Yeah.
They're just small things, housekeeping, like you said, that make more sense over here. At the end of the day, it comes out in the wash.
Yeah. Okay.
So.
That's helpful. And I think the housekeeping, what I call housekeeping, makes the budget easier to digest and more transparent. So I do definitely appreciate putting things in the place they belong and labeling them accordingly. So I'm just trying to get my own head around it. The other thing that always pops up is the Special Ed Reserve Fund. And by golly, I still don't understand how we set this number. We set it one year. Like, I thought it was going to be something that it hasn't exactly turned out to be. And so I guess I see that we're holding that number steady. I always kind of wonder why. Like, what is that? What does that? How do we determine that that is the right number to be in that fund?
So 2 years ago, when we decided to establish the reserve fund. Now, keep in mind, we've been in discussions of establishing a reserve fund for well over 5 years.
Yes, long time.
But the process of how it was to be funded was an open discussion.
Yeah.
We came to the year with COVID,
Yeah.
where our out-of-district tuitions went way up.
Yeah.
So the discussion with the town, when they are looking at giving, for instance, a 4.4% increase.
Yeah.
Now, tuitions go up and down based on student need. So the discussion was this, what could be an unusual increase,
Yeah.
was not, the thought was, let's not carry that forward, that you're then going to add your 4.4% increase on.
Right.
Because if students leave and tuitions go down. So it was just to try to isolate that increase that happened that year
Blip. Yep.
and move it out.
Yep.
Now you can see that tuitions, we're getting reimbursed highly for circuit breaker
Yeah.
for, again, that huge increase in the cost of tuitions. So while now this year the tuitions have been able to be more stable,
Yeah.
we're still not at a point where they're going down that we can then start reducing
Yeah.
that stabilization.
Thank
And it's that odd number because that was just the number that it went up that one year.
Right, that's the part that's confused. I really appreciate
Yeah.
that history. I lived it, but, it's always good to have it explained back to me.
Yeah.
And I think, so what you're saying is we haven't yet leveled out. We're still recovering from that blip.
Right,
And so-
the 14%,
Yeah, that was huge.
never mind the number of students that went out, then on top of that was 14%. So
Appreciate
we're still trying to recover.
Yeah, thank you, I appreciate that. And the only other question I had was on, again, mentally tying back to the Athena report on the middle school position, trying to remember our discussion when you came and talked to us. Can you just remind us again, I think you said reading was one of the areas that was highlighted in the report and also will be covered by this additional position. Does this also cover the START program? Is this part of that as well? There was a big discussion about that.
So let me talk a little bit about that. So this proposed budget includes 2.0 full-time special education teachers. One severe intensive,
Yeah.
identified in the Athena report, very important. A second, which is moderate, which would be what in your historical thinking, I think would be START, Empower, that model, which I would love to think more broadly about in terms of supporting students with social emotional needs in the middle school and maintaining them in class, but also providing support of a teacher when that's needed.
Okay.
So those 2.0 teachers. By doing that, because currently many of those students who are present in the middle school are on the caseload of moderate learning center teachers, it de facto lowers their caseloads. So it has a knock-on effect to all 9 of those people. And what we will then spin around and work on is the restructuring, also discussed in the Athena report, of the schedules and the structural pieces to maximize the time and defragment some of the moderate learning specialist schedules so that they can focus and provide specially designed instruction, often in reading, when needed. So we're training a couple of middle school teachers this month in Wilson reading to add to the cadre of people who will have that skill going forward. And so that's why it's linked.
Okay.
But those 2 positions would have very specific expertise in severe intensive and in social emotional.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
Yep.
I'm good. I really appreciate the elementary education for me on what this is all about.
And thank you very much. I wanted to say this budget has been built over a long time in conversation with many, many people and input. And I appreciate everyone's support very much, so thank you.
Are you have you been able to discuss all the stuff that you shared with us with CPAC?
So I will now that it's public. Absolutely.
Yeah, I was like,
That's the next stage of this process, as I understand, is public input. So,
yeah, thank you very much.
thank you.
So wait one more. Caroline, do you or anybody else for appropriations have any questions for Mrs. Hanscom?
Caroline, you go first.
I'm trying to understand the difference between the severe and intensive special ed and moderate special ed teachers. So there's certain, how do they evaluate the student to allocate them to like a different type of teachers?
Okay, so
If the change, like if the need changes, how does that impact your budget?
So both of those terms are specific Department of Education licensure categories. So teachers are licensed as severe intensive or moderate. And so students, based on the amount of time they receive special education and the type of special education services, are assigned a case manager or a liaison. And the liaison has one of those licenses. And that's how it's matched up. And then if a student's needs changed, their liaison might be changed, and they might go on the caseload of another person with a different license.
So for the FY25 planning purpose, these are the needs identified, like we're not expecting change on this basis.
So those are the needs identified based on our projections of everyone moving up a grade, as well as accounting for some growth, which has been part of our pattern. Yes.
Okay,
Thank you.
Thank you.
One question I had is kind of going on with when Amanda was, the confusion with the
In
numbers
sync
there.
today, yeah.
But I just want to make sure I understand that you had 5.5 positions that were already added, and you have the new 3.3 positions, so you have 8.8 positions. So 5.5 of those positions are funded by the revolving fund or IDEA. So are the offsets reflected in the budget, so are they not? So that's why it's only 4.8%, you're adding 8.
That's correct.
That's where that got a little
Right.
confusing.
Yes.
It seems like an awful lot of positions, and I just want to make sure how that's represented.
That's correct.
Yeah. This
In
is, I was just going to say, it's a significant investment year over year in staffing in the department, and the circuit breaker is also very helpful in managing that number.
In those other positions, just for people at home, the 5.5, are already here in the district, so that it's not an increase that the town will see over in terms of benefits for what they're paying out this year to next year, that it's the 3.3, yes, but not the 5.5.
Yep.
Correct.
And do we foresee that as an ongoing indefinitely, or just through next year's budget? Will we keep on getting, will it still be supported under the revolving fund or grants?
Yes. Yes. Yep.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Okay, so that brings us into, are we going to do the donation of the middle school student activities?
Yes.
First?
Yep. So we have had a very generous donation in support of 10 students who would be financially needy, who will also be traveling to Nature's Classroom. The tuition is $410 per student, and so the 200 Foundation, of which Adam Bortolucci, I think he runs that, and has a whole cadre of people who help him with that. So he did come to central office to give us a check for $4,100 in support of student tuition.
That's amazing.
It is
Just want to start with
amazing
that.
and very generous.
I love that so much.
I love the community support. I know that
Yes.
their Nature's Classroom is a big thing to our middle schoolers, and I know that the district, as well as different organizations and individuals within the community, have really stepped up to make sure that we can allow all of our students, and that's tremendous.
That's awesome. So happy.
Any questions before we take a vote to approve that? Is there somebody who would like to make a motion?
Yeah, I'll move to accept the $4,100 donation for HMS student activities for Nature's Classroom.
Motion by Holly, is there a second? Second by Susan. All those in favor?
Yeah.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, so that is unanimous, with deep gratitude to the 200 Foundation for that.
Great, thank you. Yes.
And that then brings us into the Hopkinton High School clubs and stipends for 23-24.
All right, so thank you. This request does come from Laura Tyson, Mr. Bishop at the high school. Neither could be here tonight, so I graciously said that I would present their information, and I think you'll be rather impressed with the nice job that Ms. Tice has done putting this together. So there are some questions about how stipends come about at the high school. And as you know, all of those, sort of activity kinds of stipends are really student generated. If a student has interest in it, that student can go to your assistant principal and figure out how to make that club a reality. So the student will express interest to Ms. Tice. The student does that by completing a Google form, submits it to Ms. Tice, and there are logistical questions about when that group will meet, dates, times, advisor, all of that. Why would they want to start the club? What are your plans and outlines for the meetings for the upcoming year? How will that club particularly benefit the high school? And you should know of any other students who are interested in joining. Then the student will meet with Ms. Tice, follow up with the proposed advisor, and then Ms. Tice will reach back out with a decision. If it's yes, that club can start immediately as proposed. It might be a no, not at this time, so you have to come back with additional information and a stronger proposal. Or it could be a no because it might be too similar to other clubs, because there's a logistical challenge, because you are unable to find an advisor, and those would be some of the reasons why a club would not run. So people are probably wondering how frequently, how many proposals are asked for in a year, how frequently they are accepted, and how frequently they are turned away. So in 2021, Ms. Tice received 18 club proposals. 16 of them turned out to be yeses. 2 were turned out to be no's. And the interesting thing is, of those 18, 6 are still running today. In 21-22, there are 25 club proposals, 15 were yeses, 10 were no's, and 4 are still running today. In 22-23, there were 24, 16 yeses, 8 no's, and 13 are still running today. And so far this year, she has received 10 proposals for new clubs. 3 have been yeses, 4 have been no's, and 3 are awaiting a decision. And so here's sort of your work tonight. We have 9 clubs that are no longer running, and you don't see those on the screen right now. But in your memo from Ms. Tice, you do note that there are 9 that are no longer running. However, there are 16 clubs currently running without a stipend. And so what the high school is proposing is that they would take the $4,950 that would normally have gone into paying the stipend for the clubs that are no longer running, those 9 clubs. That will be reallocated to pay for some of the 16, and then the additional 7, we would need $3,850 to cover the stipends for the advisors to those clubs. So essentially, that's what we're asking you to vote on tonight, is to reallocate $4,950 and to additionally fund $3,850 worth of clubs at the high school. So.
Is there a funding source identified for the $3,850 additional over the existing clubs?
So what I would say is, you can see from the number of clubs that were requested, the number that are still running, as the year goes on, the number of clubs that have been identified may not all run. So a lot of that additional funding will come from clubs that exist and have a stipend attached to it, but during this year, the student interest may not be there, and that club may not run. So that could be one section that slides over from a spring club that doesn't run. And then additionally, there is co-curricular expenses that are identified that does not always get spent. So there are little pockets, not an additional funding source. I would look to the high school additional pockets to fund those clubs.
Thank you.
I was going to ask her if the money was there to, if she could find the money to do this.
But she has a special talent for finding
I think
ways
so.
where there's $1 here or $2 there and
I felt her in my
combining them
pocket
useful.
one day.
Are there other questions related to the clubs?
No. Just on the funding, so this 550 would start this year, in this fiscal year. So that it, because otherwise, I want to make sure they keep pace with the increases, because we had now built in, I think, increases in the stipends.
The
Slight.
550 is reflected in these numbers.
Yeah.
Yes.
But I think we had the contract, I think we actually increased the stipend number slightly, don't we?
I don't
think
think
the
it's until year 3.
Until year 3, okay.
Yep.
That would be next year.
Yep.
Yeah, okay. I just want to thank Ms. Tice for pulling that. I know I had a bunch of questions about it. I'm just thankful to see this, and I think it's helpful for the community to understand the thought that goes into both being responsive to students, but actually, making sure there's a plan and a purpose, and we're not just duplicating existing clubs and so forth.
What is the Happy Hillers Club? That sounds like lovely and wonderful.
It's no longer running.
I know, but I just wanted to know what happened to
It's
it.
for happy people who like to climb hills.
Oh, well, no thanks, I guess. I don't want to climb hills.
Right. Very few people are happy climbing hills.
I feel like we climb lots of hills here.
Yeah, I have enough. I'm not happy climbing them. But these clubs are amazing. I love that they're kid-led and kid-sponsored, and our kids come up with some really beautiful ideas for clubs. So,
Yes.
thank you.
And I do want to thank Ms. Tice for putting this together.
Yeah.
She really did a nice job.
Yeah, and she does a lot of work to help, it seems like, to help these get running. Awesome.
Do you have descriptions of these clubs?
So I think when the kids get to the high school, one of the last bullets there is they do the virtual club fair. So there is a Google spreadsheet so the kids can look to see all the details of the club. When does it meet? What's its purpose?
Yeah.
What are the
I'm
happy
interested
pillars
in
do?
knowing what the linguistics club's going to do.
Yeah, and then they actually do.
I could give them my Warners,
Yep. Oh, you won't want to part with that.
No, I just put it on my bookshelf.
I know. You'll be that.
Near and dear to my heart.
So, is there somebody who would like to make a motion regarding this?
I will move to approve this.
Okay. The advisory stipends is listed.
Advisory stipends as listed.
Excellent. So motion by Susan. Is there a second on
Yeah,
that?
I'll second.
Second by Holly. All those in favor?
Yes.
Aye.
Any opposed or abstain? Okay. So those are unanimous with special thanks to Ms. Tice for pulling that information all together for us. All right, so I am just going to highlight, just before we get into the thick of the end of the meeting, that we are about a half an hour behind our schedule, that we're running 30 minutes behind. Are there,
If you wish, I can send this to you electronically, and we can do it at another time. Or we could see what we are with time, because I think the capital plan is more important
the
than doing
capital
this
plan
right
is
now.
probably the most important piece. I was going to ask if there were pieces that we want to, do you want to do that to take that electronic, and then we can discuss it at a future meeting? Is that going to?
I would love that.
That would be fine with me.
Okay.
No,
Thank
not at
you.
all.
Let's do that then. And that'll allow us to come up with lots of different questions. There we go. So,
So can I just ask, is there anything urgent that you wanted us to respond to in the goals update? Like,
No, it's perfectly.
okay.
okay, so let's then go into the capital plan.
Okay. So as you know, a few meetings ago, you looked at the FY '24 capital plan that had updated numbers. So this is just looking at the '25 capital plan moving forward. So looking at the individual items for '25, there is HVAC district-wide for $700,000, building and grounds equipment, which are vehicles, $80,000. The Hopkins addition renovation is $43,940,000. Marathon playground is $1 million. The track and field project, the design and engineering only, is $350,000. And system-wide technology upgrades is $100,000. So again, looking at those individually, the total would be $46,170,000 for FY25. The vehicle, $80,000. So this vehicle represents a replacement of one of the 5 vehicles for the 8 maintenance staff. The vehicles are used for maintenance, towing, equipment, plowing, sanding throughout the district. And the vehicles are incurring costly repairs, and this continues a replacement plan and improves the efficiency and effectiveness. The proposal for this vehicle is to use the parking revolving account for this purchase. If you remember the last vehicle that we proposed, we also used the parking revolving. We've never been able to pass along a vehicle that actually made it through the process. So this seems like an appropriate funding source to be able to move on with this replacement cycle. The technology district-wide, what we did last year was the beginning of the replacement of the wireless network. It is a 2-year process, so this is year 2 of that funding for those wireless networks. And again, there's over 400 access points district-wide that we are looking to replace. The HVAC district-wide, $700,000. Again, the focus for this is actually still on the Hopkins School. The replacement represents the large air handling units and rooftop units. The proposal is for a replacement of 3 of the 9 units at the Hopkins School. These units are in poor condition and are at end of life. The replacements for these units can be all electric and tie into the new system in the Hopkins addition if that moves forward, or we would need to look for a 1-to-1 replacement and continue on fossil fuel. So when we talk about the Hopkins addition, we are working with the engineer as they are designing the new addition to be able to create those contact points that would lead into the older building that would facilitate being able to tie into the newer system, which will be an all-green system. So the piping will be sized with points going into the older building. So you can see we're creating that roadmap. So if Hopkins continues to move forward, this HVAC replacement would then be able to tie in and be a green replacement in the older building. The high school track and field 3 for design and engineering, $350,000. The track and the field 3 with an amenities building was identified as a priority to increase access for students and the community. The track is at its end of useful life. The track has base layer deterioration, and field 3 is only utilized a few times a year to preserve the grass for football games only. And there is also not enough seating for events. The funding will be just for the design and engineering. And if you look at this, our current use of this facility is for cross-country, football, and track. There's over 100 cross-country athletes, 125 to 150 football athletes, and at the time of this slide, over 346 track athletes, all using this facility. But the interior, field 3, is reserved only for games. And all TVL football games are on turf except one school.
In addition to ours, or just?
In addition to ours, yeah. The Marathon Playground, $1 million. This is a repeat from last year. The Marathon School, again, was built with a planned enrollment of 395 students. The K-1 enrollment, and these are the grades that share this playground, is currently over 575 students. The existing playground is not able to accommodate the increased enrollment. And as a reminder, the playground at the schools are also used by the community at large. And as in last year, we did submit, again, a community preservation grant funding application for the playground. The Hopkins School addition, $43,940,000. The Hopkins School is currently unable to fit 2 grades. The existing school was designed to hold 628 students. The current enrollment is 677 students and is expected to reach 802. That's an increase of 174 students over the design. The addition will include a new gym space, general and special education classrooms, and increased parking. It will also include relocation of the new modular classrooms from the Elmwood School, again, assuming the Elmwood project moves forward. And there will also be levels of renovation in the existing building as required by code. So at this time, the addition is currently in a very early design phase. So as a reminder from the district-wide study, and Dr. Kavanaugh showed this earlier, if you look at Hopkins grade 4-5, again, the as-built enrollment is 628. At the time this slide was done, which was the district-wide study results, the enrollment was 640, but as I said, we are now at 670. So there is an increased number of students that will be coming to this school. And again, if Hopkins is a 4-5 or a 5-6, the enrollment is the same. So that number of student increase, the projected enrollment is the same no matter which of those 2 grades are there.
Yeah, I think you're about 125 students away from being at the 802.
So can I just ask a question that I have heard in the community? Because I know we've heard that multiple times now, that the enrollment is the same one way or the other. I think there's a perception in the community that this cost is driven by the cost of changing from a 4-5 to a 5-6 school, but it would seem the cost would be nearly identical to me. Is that?
Yes, yeah. So our owner's project manager at Vertex likes to describe these additions as containers. So the number of containers that you would need for students, whether it's grade 4-5 or 5-6, is really what's driving the cost, not a change in curriculum. Does that make sense?
It does, and that was, I understand that myself. I think I just want to make sure that that's clear for people in the public.
Just to clarify to the public.
And just one thing, the as-built number here of 628, we call that as-built. That's not how the original Hopkins was built. That's the original Hopkins plus the modulars that we've put on.
That's correct.
So when you think about the fact that the rest of the common space was built and designed for a much smaller number of students, below 628. 628 is because we add additional places for classes to occur.
Right.
But when we see the discussion of the needed space, we're looking at gym and cafeteria and the common space that is woefully inadequate today already. Like, we look like we're kind of close-ish to the as-built, but that is only really for a seat in a classroom.
It's really, if you can, it's hard to see the smaller gray, but the 628 is the 28 general education classrooms at 22 students with the existing modulars, and 1 special education space, at 12 students. So that's what adds up to the 628. It does not account for those common areas.
Which are all, I think, all red.
Right.
Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So just a very top level picture of what the addition would be. You can see where it says new, and so that would be tacked on to the end of the building. You can see the visitor and staff parking is redesigned, and increased number of spaces. There would be more spaces for cars and buses to be able to accommodate and get in around. The traffic pattern is much better. And then just the play field, based on the discussions with staff as to what a 4-5 or 5-6 student would be looking for when they are at recess going outside. So this is really designed around them. And this is, again, very high-level preliminary look at what we're looking at. So again, as I had mentioned, within the old building, required by code when we're doing this addition will be levels of renovation. I'll show you in the next slide, heavy renovation in the purple color would be a full gut renovation, removing walls, ceiling, floors, utilities, minor structural modifications, including trenching and cutting of existing slabs. Medium renovation could mean floor, ceiling, painting, patching, stair treads, update, refurbish woodwork, remove entirely and patch and paint, update all stair and hand railings, replace guardrails. Light renovation could be ceilings, painting, update teaching walls, flooring, casework, and extra light could be ceilings and painting. So when you look at the schematic of the existing with the addition, the dark blue would be the addition, so you can see the different classrooms, special education. Those are the modulars that are tacked on the far end. And this new addition accommodates a new gym space. So you can see within the existing building, the heavy renovation in the purple is the cafeteria area. So the cafeteria, the existing cafeteria and gym would be renovated to accommodate the new cafeteria, music areas. So that's where you really have that heavy, because that is a complete redo. And then you can see some of the medium renovation in the orange, light in some of the classrooms, and then extra light. So that's the first floor. And then on the second floor, again, the dark blue is the new construction area, and you can see the different colors. And just to call your attention to the dark purple, really where it attaches to the new construction area, because that's where you need to break through the wall to get access to the new part of the building. So that's really what drives those areas, both on the first floor and the second floor. So a reminder of the schedule, and again, we're very early on. So we're in early, the schematic design, which is the third and fourth quarter calendar for 23. We'll be moving into design development, meaning we'll start to make more decisions, really drill down more now, further in terms of where we need to be. And you can see the green star in the first quarter of 24, and that represents when there will be public presentations. And that would be both to the school committee and for public forums. And again, the construction could take us all the way where Occupy, the end of December of 26 is when you could be complete. So what did happen today, yesterday actually, we did receive our first cost estimates, and this is on that initial schematic design submission that was put out. So again, as a reminder, through the district-wide study, the concept budget, and again, think containers, in December of 22 was for $43,940,000, and that is the amount that is on the capital plan. That is what is being requested for approval this evening. The initial cost estimate that we received today is for $46,226,723. So you can see at this time with the initial cost estimate, we are over that concept budget by $2.2 million. Now the cost estimates exclude the $3 million that was voted at May town meeting of '23. That $3 million is the phase that we are in now, and that's what we are expending as part of this design phase. And both of these costs are before any expected rebates, and that's either the Mass Save and also the IRA rebates. And the reason for some of the cost increase that we're looking at, that 2.2 million, is there has been scope added since the concept budget, such as geothermal, loop road paving close to the school, a walking track around playfields, as was, we heard from teachers in terms of what students do when they go out for recess. And this scope will continue to be defined as we move along. So some of the decisions that will continue to happen in the future. So one, early November, update the school committee on the initial cost estimate. Ta-da. Early January, Hopkins design presentation will come to the school committee. So we will continue to further refine the design now that we have those initial cost estimates. Mid-January, there will be a community forum on the Hopkins project. Late January, we'll start permitting filings with the Conservation Committee and Planning Board. In January, the Construction Manager Selection Committee will shortlist CM and for the second round of submissions. Late February, the CM Selection Committee will interview 3 construction management teams and recommend awards. In early March, the school committee will review and authorize the construction manager that is being recommended. And the design team, again, will make a presentation update. April, the school committee will vote for a subcontractor pre-qualification committee. And basically what you're doing at that time is adding your CM, construction management team, to that committee. And then in May and June, the presentation of the final design and scope will come prior to bidding. And of course, we'll have a more defined number as we march along for town meeting as well. So as a reminder where we are, the end-of-life replacement cycle is the vehicle, the technology district-wide, the HVAC district-wide, the high school track and field, and in answer to the enrollment growth is the marathon playground and the Hopkins School addition. So.
Okay. I know people have questions. Anybody want to start?
I'm thinking about it.
I
can
know,
start with
it's a
an
lot
easy
to
one.
absorb.
I can start with an easy
Yes.
one. The $700,000 for the HVAC district-wide, I know we have 2 options, electric or fossil fuels. Is it roughly the same cost? And we only have one number there, so.
Correct. So until we know exactly how we are doing Hopkins, it's still a number up in the air. So it is a placeholder.
Is it like
So
the
it-
higher of the 2?
Well, it may be one of those, it may be instead of 3, you do 2
Okay.
units.
Okay.
But the
And-
2 would be the same cost as 3, probably,
Potentially,
or more.
potentially.
Is there any ability to defer them to 2026, the 2026 budget?
The difficulty is they're failing.
Okay.
So, and the reason that you want to have this in part of the design, for instance, when we are looking at the heavy renovation of the cafeteria, the existing gym and cafeteria, that actually will take some of our units. Because of that heavy reconstruction, there are units that exist there that then would be pulled in and replaced as part of the project, because they would have to. So this is where some of that renovation that happens within the building can pull some of the units that we're looking at. But until we get further down in the schematic design, is how you know which of those units, how far are you able to bring the piping.
That's a good question.
It's my starter question.
That is a good starter question. And it's certainly worth considering a lot in the context of the FY '25 capital, but also in the context of the Elmwood project that we're moving forward with right now.
I know that these are all I just get nervous because bringing another 46 million to the town is going to be difficult, and I know you know that better than anybody else. But I also see the need for every single. I was so happy to hear that the Loop Road is going to be contained within this project. That road is crazy, and they're all important and all necessary.
One thing that gives me hope, which I hope is not false hope, but is in looking what happened with the Elmwood project, where we had such a big number, where we were looking at 174 million for, it felt like forever. And it did end up down at 158 million, and I know this project is not eligible at Hopkins for the MSBA funding, but I know that Elmwood also has other federal and grant type money coming, rebate is the right word I was looking for.
Right.
Coming back, and I would hope that we would see some money coming back into Hopkins that would bring that number down, both by looking at, when we go through, the committee, not this committee, but a building committee goes through looking at, what are the specific materials that are going to be used inside, and the way that we made the choices for Elmwood, I would presume that choices will be able to be made at Hopkins to bring that number down to hopefully something that feels more doable for, I do know that there are a lot of people out there that are concerned, kind of balancing off with the number of people who are concerned with the enrollment that we have, and what are we going to do with these students if we're not able to add capacity. Certainly that's a...
Right. Yeah, and keep in mind, we just received the cost estimates. We have not even met on them. So, we'll be going through line by line to see where the variances are from the concept budget to our initial, and then it becomes the discussion of, what do we do? How do we change? What can come out? What can't come out? And again, the rebates have not been defined.
The other piece that I know that we've touched on, I think at the last meeting, but maybe I'm pretty sure the last one, was trying to form a building committee for this project specifically. I think it would improve the ability to, to invite in people from the public, to invite that as part of the process, and to thereby hopefully build what we need to get it forward to the finish line in May. I would like to bring that back at our next meeting, since that's not something we have obviously on this agenda, but to be able to add our, what assistance we can to this project.
Or even, I think we should talk about that as but also, I know you put a star in Q1 for presentation of the school committee when you've got more detail and you're ready to share, and I'm wondering if we can just keep that cadence so that we have from January on, we have frequent updates for this committee as well, so that we can weigh in as you get details. Because it's funny, it's not funny, but you look at the number and it's, over half the cost of the new school to renovate. I know we talk about, when people ask us, why don't we just renovate Elmwood? Renovating is very expensive. Renovating is crazy expensive. And
Renovating a home is often far more than just going out and buying a new home.
yeah.
To be clear, we're not looking to go out and buy a new school in this case.
Oh, no, but just
it's
renovations
expensive.
cost a lot.
It's costly, and I think this is just a reminder that, this is something that we've been looking at since the original capacity study in 2019. I think we've been watching this Hopkins in particular, in terms of just being crunched. I mean, the class sizes keep going up, those common spaces are crazy crowded, and, you know, we know Hopkins needs help, but it's just a big number, you know, and I think and when I think about, well, if for some reason the Elmwood School doesn't pass, we're going to be looking at these kind of big numbers across multiple schools with all out-of-pocket expense. So it's something to keep in mind. I mean, this is the reality that we would face times like probably 3 if the Elmwood School doesn't pass.
And they're not reimbursable.
Yeah, are we getting the $61 million? Is that right?
I would much rather.
$61 million,
$61
but
million.
also there's rebates in addition to the NSBA that bring it down to the 91 million that you had presented.
Yes,
I feel
I
like-
think if you go to that drawing that has the as-built and the current enrollment, you know, without an Elmwood passing, you still have work to do at Elmwood. You'd have to still do this
Yes.
at Hopkins to accommodate 802 or 803 students, and then the middle school and high school.
Correct. So we're looking at these big numbers, 100% out of pocket.
But for like permanent solutions, right? Like it's so much, I see it as like such a much better investment to spend this chunk of money on something that will last for a long time rather than chunk for a temporary solution that will eventually need to be replaced anyway.
Right.
That doesn't make sense at all to me. So I'd much rather spend 43 million, but I know it will be less than that, to make Hopkins, you know, sustainable for years than get 17 new, you know, trailer classrooms and trailer nurses. Like,
And then you end up with a cafeteria can only accommodate so many students,
yeah.
and you can only start lunch at a certain time and end it at a certain time.
I mean,
Where
Hopkins
it's-
is wild. Have you been inside of Hopkins?
No.
There are classrooms that have no windows. There are kids are like, administrators are doubling up in offices. It's just every available square inch of that school is being used as efficiently as they can. But it doesn't seem like it's sustainable. I mean, we know it's not sustainable. Because we're getting 162 more kids in there. I don't know where they would go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I want to take my focus away from the Hopkins edition just for a minute.
Yeah.
A couple of things that I'm happy to hear that you applied for the funding, the CPC funding. My brain is starting to slow down this evening. For both the marathon and the track and field, for Field 3. I do have concerns where if we aren't able to get CPC funding, that's still a significant amount of money. And I think specifically looking at the marathon playground, we had talked about some fundraising, and it I think would help to be able to show the town if there is going to be any fundraising that's going to be able to offset that number. Even though the tax impact might not be significant, I think it might make it a little more palatable, would be my thought on that.
I do know that the Marathon HPTO
Yep.
has been organizing and trying to figure out ways to do that.
That's great. So if maybe we could circle back with either Mrs. Dubois or with the PTO at some point between now and when this goes kind of to the next phase, to be able to add that information in. Hopefully, there would be an update on that before we get it down the line and it's marching towards town meeting. But I guess my concern in terms of like looking at the priority is the capacity things that we have, and I know that's capacity also, but wanting to make sure that projects that we feel are the biggest and most important to us, we're able to show that those are our priority, and not kind of I know sometimes we end up in a position down the road where projects of ours are being reduced or cut by bodies that are not ours, and if we can show where our preference and our priorities are, that I think would be helpful.
I think Hopkins is a
Yeah,
priority.
I think Hopkins, it sounds like the HVAC is a really
Yeah.
significant piece as well. I don't.
Can we talk about the track for a second? I know that we already delayed this project. It came forward last year and we couldn't do it. I know the track is at end of life. I guess first question, is it usable for track this season?
It still is.
Okay, because I know there are, I mean, I asked that, I know there have been schools that have had to hold their meets elsewhere when they reach a point where they didn't get funding and didn't get the track fixed. So even if we vote it this year, though, it'll be how long until we could, this is the design vote, then next year we would have a construction vote. So we would be looking at a replacement at least like 3 years out.
Probably.
So do you have any read, I should have sent you this question in advance, I apologize, on can we make it 3 years? Like, I don't know, I know that we've already delayed, I know tracks do, I mean, you've got ours gets a lot of use, we have a lot of track athletes. So just wondering if we can make it the 3 or so years.
I mean, I can't tell you that for sure. We've done patch and repair
Yeah.
for a number of years, so.
It's hard. This is, I mean, again, this is another, we have this huge piece of real estate that is Field 3 that is basically off limits, except for football games a couple of times a year, and so the track is like end of life, but the Field 3 is sort of an equity and capacity issue with all of our athletes trying to cram on the one turf that we have. And if we were to turf Field 3, it would open up lots of possibilities for practices and games and things in all kinds of weather. So it is reflective too of the enrollment growth and the demand. So it's just tough. I mean, there's just no fluff here. Like, it'd be nice to say, oh, let's just cut, something. It's really tough.
Yeah.
Just, you have any questions?
I did want to check in to see, Bill, if do you have any questions you want to?
Okay. Just yours, listening.
Appreciate it. Anybody else?
No.
Okay. I know we do sometimes come back and discuss after we find out about the CPC funding, which hopefully we have more success with this year.
So we vote this and it will go to CPC and they either approve or don't approve whatever you have on here, and then it comes back to us to revote. Is that accurate, or am I misremembering? 'Cause I don't.
Well, so if, tonight you would need to vote the capital plan.
Yeah, yep.
Regardless, because it needs to be submitted to the town manager
Yep.
by midnight today.
Oh. Sorry, can I just ask you one quick additional question? The HVAC point-to-point testing at the high school and the valve replacements and controls at the high school, they've been blanked out? Have we just deferred those for now?
Those were voted last year. I apologize
Okay.
if those lines were still in there.
Yeah, they are. I didn't know if we had additional work to be done that we.
No.
Okay,
No.
thank you.
So for CPC, they don't have their hearing for a couple of weeks.
Yeah.
They'll vote either to put it forward or not to put it forward.
Yeah.
If they do vote to put it forward, it still goes to town
Yeah,
meeting. Town meeting still needs to approve
Right.
CPC's list of projects that they have
Yeah.
put forward.
So ultimately, we're just trying to get it on the ballot or in front of town meeting, right?
Right, so either it would go on town meeting through the school committee, or it would go on town meeting if CPC does accept it.
Yep.
So.
Yeah. Okay.
I would like to motion that we accept the FY25 capital plan as presented.
Okay, a motion by Susan. Is there a second on that?
I'll second.
Second by Holly. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed or abstain? Okay, so that, thank you very much. I know that you put a tremendous amount into getting all of this here, and we just see the tip of the iceberg.
Yeah.
And appreciate that you're up against a very tight deadline.
Thank you.
We still have several hours.
Right.
Well, but we're still here.
I know.
And we are about 45 minutes, so I thought we had gained a little time, but I think we lost a little more.
All right.
So in terms of priority, bringing in the electronic voting at special town meeting had initially been requested of us by the select board chair, had asked
Yeah.
for feedback from the school committee. The electronic voting at special town meeting has, between when we last met and now, actually was approved to go forward. So I think in terms of our focus, if there's feedback that we'd like to provide that would be helpful in terms of looking at concerns that we may have, that maybe they'd be able to address in different ways. And
I thought they addressed it really well at town meeting, or
at the select board, yes.
I think it's an amazing kind of thing to think that no longer you have to have people counting.
Yeah.
When electronics is much more accurate.
Yeah.
My only concern are some of the controls. I mean, I know there's no geofence. I know it's a radio frequency. You know, I don't know, like, you know, are we going to be staffed adequately at the exits so that we know that if people have checked in with a voting device, that person is actually voting on that device and not like handing it to their neighbor who could have like a bunch, do all the votes and they all go home because they want to take care of their kids. I mean, the reality is you have to be in the room to vote. So it's the process. I just want to feel comfortable that we've got controls in place to make the votes valid. And if we have 2 or 3 voting locations, because volume is so great, you know, does the frequency work across, like will the signal be strong enough to go both in the auditorium and the gym or the cafeteria, wherever
Are
it's
they
going to
testing
be?
it at all those places? Yeah.
Are they testing, right, and are there controls in every hall within the building that could have voters? Just the controls piece, we just don't have a lot of time to spin this up for town meeting. It's gonna be a pretty quick turn. I know they've been working on it. The moderator was not at the select board meeting, so I don't know if the moderator is feeling comfortable moderating what will be probably a fairly emotional town meeting and this vote process. And it's really, for me, I just would like comfort that we're ready to handle the volume and the moderator is comfortable with the process. That's all.
I think that's really good feedback.
Yeah. I think those are excellent points. I actually had sort of envisioned that as being a concern, the piece of if people show up initially and then decide partway through the discussion they've got to get home for whatever reason, to make sure that 8 people aren't handing one person, say, oh, this is how I want to vote.
Maybe those people who generally float around and count, maybe float around and keep an eye out for that. Because I'm thinking one person with 8 devices is going to be fairly obvious.
If they're in the auditorium and not in a different room.
Yeah.
But even if you have people floating around, I mean,
It's just tricky, and the people who vote, that's a defined and narrow task at a point in time that they know how to do. Like, this is a new set of responsibilities with, you know, the people aren't, you have to interact with people and say, excuse me, is that really your device? And I mean, those are different kinds of skills in clicking and counting. And it's just, it's tough, that it can be a tough environment. And I'm grateful for the counters that we have and the staff.
It's not related to your point, but I wanted to mention that if somebody needs a accommodated device or accommodations at the town meeting, they have to let the select board or the town manager know by November 8th. Because they will make efforts to accommodate anybody that needs additional support. With those counters, with those devices, like they have Braille ones available, they said. I don't know if there's other ways, but. And they said if we get there early, they'll train you how to use them. So, I mean, it's 2 buttons, so I don't know how extensive the training is.
I think a really good point about getting there early, though.
Yep.
People need to
Ignore
get
the other button. Ignore the other.
town meeting on the 13th early. Parking will be tight.
Yeah.
Checking in will be new.
Yep.
Like, and they'll start, if there's quorum at 7, they're gonna start at 7.
Yep.
So even if you're still waiting to check in, they're not gonna hold.
Right.
As long as there's quorum. So people really need to get there on time.
Yeah.
And leave plenty of time to park and get through the process. Get their device and get a seat.
I think they were opening at 6. Is that what they
believe
said?
so.
Yeah.
So, thinking of the number of devices, I think they had said 2,500 at the select board meeting that they're intending to have, which means multiple spaces within our our building being used.
Right.
I also had heard that there was a likelihood of childcare being
Yes.
provided on site, so that if there are multiple places being used for people to be able to both participate in the meeting, vote, and see it on a screen, is that going to impact where we're able to have childcare? Okay.
So my understanding is the child care is supposed to be in the library.
Oh, okay.
We don't believe the frequency will carry to the library.
Okay.
So if you
That's-
are in there with your child at that point in time,
Great.
when the vote is going to happen, you will have to physically leave the library and go back to the auditorium or the gym
Yep.
or the hallway outside.
Okay, that's great, great news.
Can you vote from the hallway?
That would seem like possibly they're going to need monitors in the.
The
hallway.
hallway, is
So
that,
they've identified 4 locations, the auditorium first, then the gym, then the cafeteria, and if they still need space, it'll be the hallway area outside of the auditorium.
It would be interesting to talk with anybody who was present at the vote for the high school, which apparently did have 2,000 people at, because it must have happened in the current middle school. Just to. Okay, but that, potentially, the Doyle gym would not be able to be used, because I'm sure the frequency can't cover that far either, right?
I think they only mentioned the Brown gym.
The Brown gym.
Okay. All right. Thank you, everybody, for the feedback.
Oh, you have to register to vote by tomorrow to be able to
Oh,
participate.
yes, so for those who would like to participate and have not registered to vote, tomorrow's the deadline. It's great. Okay, so that brings us then into old business. We do have a few policies on here. What are people's thoughts?
these policies are not urgent.
I was hoping you'd say that.
Is that what you're looking for?
That was what I was looking for.
I'm looking, I should look at Dr. Kavanaugh first. Do you think these policies need to be voted tonight?
No, I don't. I think
You can ask me.
I
Do
think
you
Susan
think-
would like to stay, is what she's trying to say.
Susan wants to talk about them at 7:30.
Wouldn't you die if cinnamon rolls appeared at your homes at 7:30 in the morning?
I'm waiting for someone to invent the smeller net and the taster net to allow things to transmit between. All right, so that then, if we're going to postpone the policies, as long as that's okay by consensus here, that then brings us, if there are future agenda items people would like to see brought forward, also always the opportunity to email that.
Thank you.
That then brings us into items by consensus.
Okay, Superintendent, I recommend the school committee approve the items by consensus as outlined in your agenda.
So moved.
Motion by Amanda, is there a second? Second by Holly, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, so that is unanimous and so carries. I then would seek a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Okay, so
So
motion
seconded.
by Holly, second by Susan, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, and that is unanimous. We are adjourned at 9:40 PM. Our next meeting is on November 16th with some budget presentations as well as a regular meeting on December 2nd. There also is an Elmwood project forum on Tuesday, which is the 7th. 7th, correct. At 7 PM, the same as the last one where it's going to be hybrid in the high school.
Correct.
All right, thank you all, and have a good night.